Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Devy Workshop. I'm your host, Jordan. We have another great episode for you with another great guest. But first, before we introduce him, let's make sure you subscribe to the channel. You know, all the good stuff, but like it really helps grow the channel, and it makes me very happy, and I'm very thankful if you can do that. As you can see, we've if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the guests. But if you listen on podcast, I've introduced a special guest to go through this episode this week. It's Nelly. Nelly, you can find him on Twitter at Nelly Ticks. Very hard to pronounce when it looks so easy, but we'll drop all the things in below. If you're a massive Devy person, I'm sure you would have clocked onto the Devy Marketplace, where probably my favorite podcast, you know, and videos. You know, it really got me into Devy. You know, when I first started, it was a fantastic place, great laughs and stuff. So yeah, he's one of the three on there. Fantastic podcast, and I'll drop that in the link if you haven't caught it. It's definitely worth catching. Nelly, thank you for coming on. I appreciate you jumping on and talking some. We're going to talk some Big 12 Devy players.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited. Excited for this new show and to spread this out. I love more and more people getting involved here. It's such a fun space.
Yeah, it's I've been playing for I think this is my fourth year, you know, playing Devy now. You know, probably 3 more hardcore, and it's kind of getting a bit bigger in the UK. I feel like probably could do catching fire a little bit more in the US, but picking up still, or because I know you've got the C2C, which we'll leave for now, which is really in depth with the college and the thing which I play a few leagues in. But yeah, it's catching fire over here. What's it like, Devy, over in the US? Is it something that's still kind of like simmering, or is it really quite big over in the US?
I think it'd still be considered niche. It's certainly catching up on popularity. I think C2C has actually helped, right? Because both of them kind of promote the college game. It promotes the kind of scouting aspect. But I think as more people get involved in Dynasty, right, it's just a natural progression to want to learn about these rookies more and more. And so the next step is always Devy. So I think as Dynasty grows, Devy will continue to grow.
Yeah, I think over here it's kind of catching on a little bit because obviously NFL, as you probably know, that it's growing a lot over in the UK. A lot of people have been playing fantasy for a number of years, and obviously now they want to grasp out. And there's a bit of college football on the UK screens. We can't get to watch every game, but we normally get the popular games on a Saturday to watch. So yeah, we've even got it's going to be our second year having a game in Ireland as well, which is fun. So yeah, it's kind of growing over here with the college game as well. So yeah, it's hopefully more people get involved over here. We are getting a few, so I think it's a really fun game, you know, especially if you like college. It gives you that interest, even if you don't want to watch every college game. It gives that interest to go at least watch a bit of college and watch the guys that you've got on your team, you know. And hopefully some of them we're definitely going to talk about now for the Big 12. We'll try and get through as many as possible. Obviously, just for this year only, there's 14 teams in the Big 12, which is quite a lot. There's some good teams coming over. We've tried to get a few players from the teams that have come over from the ACC. So do you want to let's get into the quarterbacks? Start off, and obviously we've got to start at Texas. We've got 3 really good quarterbacks that go quite high in 2 of them definitely go quite high in every drafts. If you go in a deeper draft, the other guy who's in his second year, we haven't seen much of him. I haven't seen, you know, we've seen him in the spring game. Sorry, he's going a bit later, but we'll start with the starter at the moment. Quinn Ewers is someone that I was quite high on, and I feel like people have flopped off him a bit, and I still think, yeah, he maybe has lost a bit of stock, but I still think he's a guy that could be really good at the next level. There's a few things to work on, but his ceiling is so high. Where are you on Quinn Ewers? Have you fallen off him a lot more? Because that's what it seems to be a lot in the Devy. If you go on Twitter, a lot of people are not talking about him whatsoever and kind of got off him. Are you in that bracket, Nelly, or you still think there's something there?
No, I've faded off him a decent amount. For me, with quarterback evaluation, like there's kind of 2 facets, right? It's like projecting to the NFL and then projecting for fantasy utility. And you still kind of have that projection to the NFL because he's one of the best quarterback recruits of all time. He has the raw arm strength. He's got the body for it, right? But kind of the biggest red flag for me from this past year, outside of the passing deficiencies, which can kind of be explained by inexperience, is he had negative rushing yards on the year, right? So that kind of creates this much higher standard that he has to hit to be someone that is not only not only relevant at the next level, but someone who is like a premier asset in regular dynasty.
It's obviously we always try. You make a good point. Actually, you always try and hit on that rushing side, but obviously, if there's no rushing on limited rushing there, then like you mentioned, you've got to try and look at if his passing game, really like a step above the other passers in the league. And I feel like there were a couple of games last year. I think the TCU and I think it was Oklahoma State games that really stuck in my head where he struggled passing wise. Still a lot to learn. Obviously, it's because obviously he was at Ohio State. He didn't play over there, but transferred out, and it kind of was his freshman year. So it'd be interesting to see what he does this year. But I kind of get on point with what you're saying about it. It's still needs a lot more work and a lot more to show if he is going to be fantasy capable in the NFL. Obviously, you mentioned the lack of rushing there for you as a guy that a lot of people are still high on. Obviously, when I say still high on, I don't mean it like obviously we haven't seen him yet. This is going to be his second year. I suppose the question is for Malik Murphy, that is, how high are you on him, Nelly? And do you see him ever being a starter at Texas? Obviously, we're going to talk about the guy that's just coming behind him in a second. Do you see him maybe transferring out to see his full potential? And are you a guy that's kind of still on him? Because obviously he was a big recruit from the 2022 class.
No, I wouldn't say so. I think probably his clearest path to play time is if Quinn Ewers is terrible early this year. Because the third guy that we'll talk about soon probably isn't ready to play yet. And so right now, I think Malik Murphy is the backup at Texas. That being said, if the year kind of goes to plan, right, where Quinn Ewers is the starter the full year, potentially off to the NFL, and there's a new quarterback going into next season, I think it's unlikely that quarterback is Malik Murphy. Texas has a succession plan, and I think he's going to be fighting an uphill battle, fair or not, just because of what they've put into bringing in Arch Manning, what they've done to kind of like the plan that they've kind of put in place. That being said, I think him showing well in the spring is good for his stock overall, right? Like I think his best or most likely path to relevancy is a transfer out to another Power 5 school. Let's say he gets a game or two this year, looks good, right? Like I think he'll have a chance to potentially showcase himself. And I think most likely we see Malik Murphy starting for a different team next year.
I suppose like it leads on to a good question. Like obviously I mentioned at the top that I haven't played Devy as long as some people over there. So how do you I remember like when quarterbacks or anyone I suppose position transferred out, it was seen as a kind of not maybe a massive red flag, but a red flag in some areas, transferring out, not being able to beat the opposition there. Do you evaluate that differently now because of how the transfer portal is and how like people are moving constantly over? Is it something where it's in the back of your mind, but it's not as at the forefront as it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah, I think it's certainly changed. It's become kind of less taboo. And I think people are viewing it more from the player's point of view. Like I think context is key for each and every situation here, right? Like if Malik Murphy transfers out because he has a 5-star ahead of him and a 5-star behind him, and he just wants a chance to play, like I don't think he gets faulted as a prospect for that. Like if anything, it's like, oh, this guy is like realistic and introspective and can make good decisions. I think in a situation like this, it's not a negative if he does transfer out.
And obviously, we mentioned a guy that I think most people know about. Even people who don't follow college football have heard about Arch Manning. Obviously, 5-star recruit from this year. There's some good 5-star recruits coming out this year, and I think the first part of the question is, where do you rank Arch Manning with these 5-star quarterbacks coming out, especially the top 4? And obviously, I think you mentioned that you see him potentially is not going to be ready this year, starting next year. He's obviously 2024. Yeah, so how good can Arch Manning be? What is the ceiling, and where does he rank with these four? Because this, for me personally, I think these four are quite close. I don't know how you've got the top four. I'm guessing it's a similar top four, unless so I feel I know a few people throw a few surprises in there, but it seems like most people have got the top four as like Moore, Manning. I think it's Iachevia, and I can never pronounce his name, so I probably butchered that. I apologise. Of them, they're quarterback from Tennessee, and who am I missing now? Who I got?
Malachi Nelson.
Malachi Nelson. I think everyone's got them four at the top. So yeah, I suppose my question is, where have you got Manning with these four, and have you got them all quite close together?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm pretty chalk. I don't do a ton of high school scouting. I mean, I'll look at some numbers. More importantly, I kind of look at like prototypes. I actually look at rushing numbers from high school to see kind of what that sort of projection looks like to the next level. But my sort of player evaluations don't really start until we see them on the field in college. I just think the skill gap is so wide in high school, depending on where you're playing, that's difficult. I think with Arch Manning, I think the name actually matters, right? Like, I think for multiple reasons, perception-wise and value-wise, he is going to be considered safe. He's going to continue to be vaulted up maybe over where he would be if his last name was Smith, right? Like, I think that does make a difference. Also, like, the NFL potentially cares about that as well. Like, we see this sort of thing happening where names get shots in the NFL, maybe not quite based on merit. But the other thing is, right, he's learning from two really, really, really good NFL quarterbacks. Peyton Manning is one of the all-time greats. He has both the genetics there and he has the guidance there. So I think that matters for sure. For me, I rank him one in the class. I mean, I'm not super picky among who I'm going to pick, but he's also super young. He's one of the younger quarterbacks in that group. He's one of the more athletic and mobile ones. He's nothing like his uncles. He's a very athletic guy. And so I see both of those points as positives as well.
Yeah, you saw a bit of that athleticism in the spring game. Like, you make an interesting point, especially from someone from the UK who doesn't maybe can get out to watch the games, because when guys come in from high school, all I can do is go watch YouTube tape, and it's always the best plays. So is that similar to you over there? Is that all you've really got to look at, unless you're close to a guy that can go maybe watch a game? Because then that make it harder to. Obviously, you can take some evaluation. Is that where you probably think that looking at the numbers becomes better? And what about the area of where they're playing in the high school? Is that a big factor in, like, where you think, if this guy's doing really well down in Texas, then this is going to be better than someone maybe doing somewhere in another place?
Yeah, it definitely matters. I mean, you're right. It's hard for anyone to get their hands on full game film from high school. Like, that's near impossible. So it's kind of a level playing field in terms of a lot of. Everyone over here is pretty much working with highlights and whatever the players put out as well, unless the school is high profile enough for it to be televised, which is few and far between. But no, I mean, like, Arch Manning, I mean, that's one of the knocks on him. He's playing, I believe, in like a weaker division in Louisiana, whereas Jackson Arnold's playing in like the best division in Texas, like the best football league in the country. Malachi Nelson's playing in a hotbed out in California. Like that certainly matters. It's really difficult to navigate, which is kind of why I don't, right? Like, it's how do you quantitatively weigh how good the area is in the country? Because it fluctuates and there's so few comparison points. Like, it's not often that you see teams from out of state playing against each other, right? Like, it happens very seldom. So it's a very difficult prospect.
So I suppose, like, again, this, because obviously for people new to Devy, trying to draft these like high school guys early, because obviously they've heard from other people this guy's good. You was mentioning there that you try not to evaluate them until they get to, like, obviously played a few stats in college. Are you, when it comes to drafting, what are you going for when it comes to these high school? Are you looking for people that are already there and trying to draft these guys before the high school guys, or you kind of got an idea that maybe this guy I can really take a chance on, he could be good, and draft them before people that you've probably seen that have got a high upside as well?
I think I'm ever so slightly freshman averse. I don't completely avoid them, but I do kind of, because my source of truth essentially is the recruiting services, right? Like, I use 24/7 and On3 to kind of give me a sense of how good these players are. I know it's not a perfect science, but I think it's pretty solid in terms of what we've seen from hit rate. So like 5-star guys across all positions are guys who I am drafting, I'm high on. So like I'll take Arch Manning and Malachi Nelson like end of the first round in a Devy draft, like in like a startup. So we're talking like top 12 players, and the other top freshman quarterbacks and top freshmen at other positions aren't far behind.
So you could really go on and talk about stuff like that for age, especially for like showing the like new guys, that are playing Devy for the first time. It's even if you've been an experienced Devy player, it's still not easy to try and get these guys and be super like definitely this guy's going to make it in the NFL. So moving on, I've put 3 quarterbacks down here. I'm not massively high on them, but I just know that a few of these guys go late, especially in your Devy drafts that are 10. If you've got 10-round deep Devy drafts, these guys are going late. I've put down obviously Will Howard from Kansas State, Hunter Deckers from Iowa State, and Jalen Daniels from Kansas, who had a good year despite being injured last year. For me, if I had to pick one, Hunter Deckers is the guy that I'm probably like I'd maybe take late on, but the other two I'm still kind of not sure on. Like Will Howard's struggled his first 2 years. I don't think Kansas State are really anticipating playing for these 3 years and stuff, but he's had to come in and when I think it was Skylar Thompson was there at the time injured, and obviously Adrian Martinez last year did quite well. Will Howard in that small sample size that we had, but Jalen Daniels is another one where he's got that rushing side, but I see big problems with as a passer. How do you feel about these three guys? Do you see anything differently to how I see it, or are you drafting them late, or is there somewhere where they're probably going to make it onto depleted rookie drafts in the future?
Yeah, I think they're all long shots. It's going to be tough for these guys to they're fighting an uphill battle, right? Because they're unregarded to start off with, so they really need to prove themselves, and they're playing for, let's call them average Power 5 teams. I think of the group, Will Howard has grown on me. His passing efficiency this past year was pretty good. He had almost 9 adjusted yards per attempt, which is a stat I look at. That's well above average in college. He's also a pretty good athlete, right? His freshman year, he ran for almost 400 yards. That's including sack yards. So that's pretty solid. He's a good athlete, and he's massive, right? He's like 6'4", 6'5", 240 pounds. So to me, that presents an opportunity for the NFL to view him as an upside project. I mean, they love the size, right? Like that's Jalen Daniels has very similar numbers, but he's 6 foot, right? So he's that's another obstacle he has to overcome. And I think the other thing is, of the 3 teams, Kansas State is, a potential top 10 team this year. I think they'll be top 25. They were pretty good this past year. And they'll probably have to lean on the passing game a little bit more without Deuce Vaughn. So like that provides the exposure and the upside for Will Howard to take a big step forward. It will need to be a big step forward. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm not saying he's going to be a future first round pick, but if I had to pick one of these guys to become a future first round pick, it would be him.
That's right. Like I said, I think he did. In the sample size we saw this last season, when he came in for Adrian Martinez, who went down a couple of times, he did really well, and obviously a full season could a really good full season could really propel his stock going forward. The last quarterback, obviously, you mentioned him when we was talking about Arch Manning, was obviously the freshman from Oklahoma, Jackson Arnold. Again, very raw. I'm not a massive fan of Dylan Gabriel, who was there. I think he's a fantastic college quarterback. I don't see him doing anything at the next level. But do you think Jackson Arnold's still too raw to be pushing him for a start? And it'll be next year that we see this guy. Because I mentioned the 4 guys at the top. I still think Jackson Arnold's probably in a tier of his own behind, and still could push into that tier come next year. But do you think we won't see him till next year? Do you think?
Yeah, I think it's unlikely we do. I think Dylan Gabriel is, while not an NFL prospect, I think he's an above average college quarterback, and he's like a 5th-year senior, right? So it'll take a lot for a true freshman to unseat him. That being said, I am very excited for Jackson Arnold. I consider him part of the top 5. I don't have him below those 4. And actually, what's most enticing with him is he's the most athletic, the most He presents the most rushing upside of the 5-star freshman quarterback. And he did that playing in probably the best high school league in the country, in 6A in Texas. So he's kind of, I feel like he's pretty safe because of that. I think sitting for a year is actually probably a good thing for a lot of these young quarterbacks, getting a year of development to learn these college offenses. But there is a ton of upside there. If it kind of goes to plan, he becomes a starter in a year in a Jeff Levy offense, get some weapons into Oklahoma. They'll be in the SEC next year, right? So it'll be a big step up, but that's a good thing if all works out.
Yeah, definitely. He's a guy. I think I've only seen him in the spring game. I think Brandon Levine put some highlight. Obviously, he's fantastic at putting Devy highlights. Another great guy to follow. I think he put together a montage of his plays. You mentioned the rushing upside looked really good in that aspect, and hopefully we'll see him next year. Moving on to the running backs, again, starting with Texas because they've got a pretty decent room, even though I do like the Oklahoma 2 running backs that we'll get onto in a minute. Obviously, the number 1 overall pick in all rookie drafts has left Texas this year. Bijan Robinson, who was, so many people had him as one of the best running backs coming out since Shaquem Barkley. And obviously, there's another guy there, that the true freshman this year, Cedric Baxter, who a lot of people are really high on this year. And I know we mentioned that it's obviously you find it hard to scout people coming in from high school, but are people putting too much stock on Cedric Baxter Jr. because of what's happened with Bijan Robinson, or is this guy capable of being another one of these freak running backs coming out of high school into college?
That's a good question. I think that's a good point with Bijan potentially inflating expectations with Baxter. Like, don't draft Baxter expecting him to become the next Bijan, even if he's the starter on day one. Like, Bijan Robinson is an incredible prospect, right? Like it will be very difficult to hit that sort of ceiling. But that being said, I'm still super high on him, right? Like, he's the number 1 running back in the services, and beyond that, he's big and he can catch the ball. And those are 2 kind of massive points for me in terms of checking boxes of prospects. To kind of mitigate the fact that I don't really do high school scouting, I'm pretty in touch and responsive to camp reports when these guys show up early to school. And they're splitting this guy out wide in the slot to run some routes and catch the ball. For a true freshman running back to be doing that, a guy who's like 6 foot 220, like that's impressive to me. That shows a level of versatility that is super valuable.
Yeah, obviously we see what obviously Sarkisian's offense is very different to a lot of other colleges, so I'm sure he'll try and, if he's good enough, he'll be fitting in where he can, even if it's not in the backfield, if it's out wide. So obviously it'd be interesting to see what touches he gets this year, but obviously at the moment, I don't know how, we will know later on and stuff. Obviously they've got Jonathan Brooks as the number 1 running back in the room, but a guy that obviously a lot of people was quite high on last year when high school coming out was Jaden Blue. I still think that there's a good player there and stuff, but obviously as soon as there's a shiny new toy come in, everyone forgets about the guy from before. Where are you at with Jaden Blue? Do you think, I don't know if he was high on him before, obviously, and if you still think he'll be, do you think that how the usage is in Texas, do you think that you'll see more of like Jaden Blue and Brooks, or do you think one of these will get, it's weird with Sarkisian because obviously he likes to, Bijan Robinson was like a unique prospect where he just had to play him all the time because he was so good, but you still saw Roshan Johnson and I forget the other running back that was there. It was
Keontae Ingram.
Yeah, that's the one.
When Bijan was a freshman,
who still got touches and who still went quite high in the draft as well. So how do you see Sark like running these guys this year? Do you see? Do you think we'll see a lot of Jaden Blue this year?
Unfortunately, no, I don't think so. I think the present is Jonathan Brooks. I think Brooks will be the starter. They also have a scat back, Keelan Robinson, that is not Devy relevant, but he'll get touches on his own. So I think it's tough, right? Because we have the present plan, we have Brooks and we have Keelan Robinson, and then the future is Cedric Baxter. It's probably more a matter of when rather than if. So Jaden Blue's kind of stuck in this limbo part where He's not the present. It's kind of been shown already. The bowl game last year, Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson were out, and Jadon Blue didn't get any touches. Jonathan Brooks and Keelan Robinson got all the touches. It was kind of a preview of what this year would be. Now you add kind of the future plan to the equation with Cedric Baxter, and it's like, where does Jadon Blue fit in? So unless he shows leaps and bounds improvements, he's not going to get a shot at Texas, at least from my perspective. I think he's another guy, kind of like Malik Murphy, who we talked about, where I think his best path to relevancy is probably to go somewhere else, find a new home.
It's going to be interesting to look at the Texas running backs this year and see how they go. They're always a fun team to watch. A guy that I wouldn't say super high on, but I was taking him quite late last year in drafts on middle was Devin Neal. I saw a lot of people were questioning his usage in 2022, but if you look back, he's still got a lot of touches. Like more touches than he did the year before. So. Obviously, I don't know how much they're going to. Obviously, they still run the ball loads, but I don't know if they'll still hit the heights as they did last year. They were quite surprised early on Kansas, where they was playing in front a lot of the time and in big back and forth games where they could run the ball a lot. Because obviously, the size-wise, Devin Neal looks he's great on paper. Runs the ball well. Are you still? Or were you ever on Devin Neal, or were you ever drafted him at a certain point? And do you find it like, because when I was saying, like, a lot of people were saying, oh, he's losing a lot of touches, but he had more touches last year than he did year one. So where do you stand on Devin Neal, like, going into year 3 for Kansas?
So I think I'm probably around the middle in terms of valuation for him. I would take him towards the end of like the 4th round of a Devy draft, looking at my rankings. So I guess I don't know if that makes me high or low. I worry with him. One, you're right. The workload, while not terrible, I mean, he still had nearly 200 carries for over 1,000 yards. He is not a true workhorse there. They had another back. I think his name is Daniel Hinshaw. It's something like that. Yeah. He played for the first half of the year, and they almost split touches. And then he got hurt, and Devin Neal kind of took over a little bit more. But that guy will be healthy again this year, I would assume, and will continue to get serious touches. The other big thing is I think he kind of faces a similar battle that Sean Tucker did, where even if the production is phenomenal, it's still a 3-star recruit that is facing an uphill battle at an average at best Power 5 program to kind of prove that they can be an elite pro, right? Like, it's the production is basically necessary to even get to the table. Right, like he's a good back. He can do it all. He can catch the ball pretty well. He's good in short down and distance situations. Like, he can do everything, but he should, because he's playing at Kansas. So it's like, even if the production is there, that doesn't even lock in day 2 capital for me. Like, I hope it does. I think it can, but it's no lock. So that's why, despite the production being pretty good, he's still someone who I'm ever so slightly hesitant on.
Yeah, it's. I think I was taking him maybe like in the deep ones, round 5 and 6. That was me hoping he was be a day 2 guy, but I see your points there and stuff, and it's the good points to make. Especially, I suppose, with a 3-star guy, they're always. You need something probably a bit more exceptional, don't you, to really have eyes on him, especially at a team like Kansas. So it's really good points there. I mentioned it at the top with the Texas running backs, but the 2 second-year running backs going to second year at Oklahoma, Javonte Barnes and Gavin Sawchuk. Gavin Sawchuk was a guy that I wasn't really looking at last year in drafts, and he was going quite late a lot of the time, and we only really saw him in the bowl game. And Javonte Barnes saw quite a little bit more than that, but we really popped off in the bowl game as well. Both 4-star guys from the 2022 class. I think Sawchuk was ranked higher than Barnes as well, but I really like Javonte Barnes. He's got, obviously, going into year 2. They look like these 2 guys are going to be probably worked a bit more. But do you think Javonte Barnes has got that edge because of, obviously, I think he had 500, 600 last year as a true freshman. Yes, do you think he's going to be the main guy that they lean on? And where are you at with these 2 guys in Devy stock-wise?
Yeah, Devy-wise, I like Barnes the most. I think he's bigger than Sawchuk. Sawchuk is a great athlete, but he's undersized, which, again, is kind of an uphill battle, right? Like he has to be that much better because he's undersized. Whereas Barnes is a little bit more prototypical size wise, and he got the work as a freshman. So like for me, I kind of tend to follow what has already been told to us in terms of like historical usage until it gets proven otherwise. It's probably going to be a bit of a nightmare. Their offensive coordinator Levy at Oklahoma loves committees. Those two will be involved. Marcus Major, who's like a super senior, is going to be involved as well. If it kind of stays a true committee, I'm probably not going to be super high on any of them. The hope for me is that Barnes kind of takes the main role there. And for me, I see him having the most upside if he can kind of do that as a second-year guy and build on what he did in year one.
Yeah, because I think when he first came in last year, I think I want to say 185. I'm not sure when he put on the more weight, if it was this, obviously he was on all like through the season. I think he's at 205, 203 or something now. You mentioned like prototypically, like obviously I think Sawchuk's 185 or something around about that. You mentioned obviously the size there, which is how, when you're looking at size for running back, I always try and get over 200 myself if I'm looking at someone. Obviously, there can be guys below 200 that can obviously do something, but I'm always more reluctant. If they're just over the 200-pound mark, obviously depending on like height as well, is that something that you're aiming at, or is it just depend on the player as well and how they play? Because obviously you can get people at a lower weight that can play a lot bigger than they probably are listed.
Yeah, I don't live by any like hard and fast thresholds, right? It's not like if someone is sub 200, it's like instantly off my board. It kind of depends player by player. And actually, I like the last point you made. It's more how they turn the weight and size into their play style, right? Like if a guy's 195 but plays like a 3-down back, like he's kind of showing that he can handle that, right? And it's more a means to discover a player's usage at the next level. Like Gavin Sawchuk is like, he doesn't have the frame to ever be a 3-down back. He's pretty skinny. He's kind of built more like a wide receiver. Whereas Javante Barnes, he is only listed at 200 pounds, but he looks a little bit thicker. He looks like he can be like a 3-down sort of back that provides a little bit more fantasy utility.
So I remember when I was watching some tape of Javante Barnes, this like I think it was like through spring. Like I say, I don't know when he put on that pounds, because I had him on my like spreadsheet at 185, and when I've gone back and watched him, I was thinking, oh, he's playing a lot bigger than 185. But then I went to look back on 247, and he's at 203 pounds listed there. So I don't know when he put that on, if he was still playing at 105, looking big and stuff. I suppose it's hard to say, but he did. If he was playing 185, 190, there where he was, he did play a lot bigger. I've put a few guys at the bottom on the running back. Obviously, if you want to shout anyone else out, it's fine. There's obviously LJ Johnson transferred from Texas A&M to SMU. Obviously, SMU are going to be one of the new teams over in the Big 12. Obviously, he was a decent recruit. Obviously, was behind Devin A-Chain and Spiller at Texas A&M. So I think he didn't have. I can't think it off my head. He didn't have many touches over the 2 years there. We mentioned it earlier in the thing, obviously the times have changed in college where people transfer out, it's not seen as a bad thing, but are these bigger concerns for him having so little touches from Texas and moving to SMU, or is it other things on top of that as well?
Yeah, it's so hard to say, right? Like I think for him, that's like he wants more time. It is a pretty big drop off though, and there are a bunch. I mean, SMU has brought in like a ton of backs in the portal. They brought in Kamar Wheaton from Alabama last year. They brought in Jalen Knighton from Miami this year, who's also pretty good. And they have a couple guys there who have gotten touches in the past. So like the SMU backfield is like, I'm just completely off there until I am told that I basically need to look at it.
A guy that I've wanted to bring up as well. It's not someone that's ever been drafted. I haven't done many Devy drafts this year, from my leagues and stuff. But like obviously last year, no one was really touching him, even the deep stuff. But again, we mentioned the size isn't great. He's only 175. That's Richard Reese from Baylor. But he was really fun to watch last year. It was really real big speedster guy. As soon as there was space, he was away. You know what I mean? As soon as there was a gap bursting through it, you weren't stopping him. I think I saw somewhere that when I was like just looking at stats on him, recently just before the podcast, he hit 21 miles an hour in one of his games last year. So he's a super fast guy. How do you stand on guys like? Cause obviously, he had a fantastic freshman season. Obviously, we mentioned the size is a big. I suppose it's the same as Devin Ainchain. I wasn't massive on Devin Ainchain, fantastic college running back, but he has fallen into a great position in Miami. I suppose by drafting these guys in Devy, you're really playing a game out where you want him to, for these smaller guys to be in the perfect fit in the NFL, and you just can't predict that going forward.
Yeah, it's tough. It's like, is Richard Reese more Devin Achane, or is he more Deuce Vaughn? Right, like, because Devin Achane is kind of, he's proven he can be a 3-down back. That being said, Deuce Vaughn did too, but Deuce Vaughn is just tiny, right? Like, it's impossible to project that at the next level. Richard Reese is kind of in the middle. He's super exciting. He's super kind of, it's hard to project him, right? It is shades of Deuce Vaughn for me. For me, I think he's more like Deuce Vaughn. Size-wise, he just is that little bit smaller. But I mean, Deuce Vaughn just got drafted, right? What was it, the 5th or the 6th round? And half the battle is getting to the league if you're a Devy guy. Like, not every pick you're going to take is going to be a home run. So if you're drafting Richard Reese in like the 15th round of a Devy draft, let's say you're going deep, you're digging for names, he's a really good football player above all else. Like, the role might not be perfect at the next level, but what did he put out? He put up over 1,000 yards as a true freshman in the Big 12, right? And he's doing this at a tiny size, so he has to be that much better at everything else. He's a good receiver too, like you said. He's a good athlete, so there's a lot to like.
And the other guy I put down who also had a great freshman season, unless there's someone else you want to mention, the running back position, is CJ Donaldson, which is a guy who was a tight end to running back, someone that when he started putting up 100-yard games for West Virginia, when the games were on over in the UK, I had to go look this guy up because it was someone that I haven't heard of before. But he's obviously done well in his first year. But do you see him as good enough at that next stage? Obviously, definitely maybe good enough to be drafted, but obviously, like he's had a great season. But is he more just does he have enough under the bonnet? He seems like more of just a power runner as it stands at the moment. But great first season coming from tight end to running back, though.
Yeah, it's super intriguing, right? It's like almost shades of Braylon Allen, who was a linebacker coming into school and an athlete before a running back, and kind of has this path to develop, but he's not quite there yet. But we still value that pretty high in Devy. Kind of flip side of the coin of Richard Reese, CJ Donaldson is massive. He's like 6'2", 240, I think is what I've seen him listed at. And he was a tight end recruit, right? So he can catch the ball. So that's like check and check. Those are two things that we really like to see. I think there's upside if he can develop other aspects to his game, right? He wasn't supposed to be a running back, right? So he has room to develop there. But I think there's upside there because he's raw, and despite being raw, he has produced. And his main competition in that backfield transferred out as well. Tony Mathis left. So I think that's a positive sign that it's going to be his room moving forward, and he'll have the opportunity to improve.
So moving on to the wide receivers, got some decent talent there. I could have easily gone with Texas again, but I wanted to mix it up a little bit instead of going Texas straight away off every position. So a guy that I ended up with quite a lot of in my deeper Devy draft last year was the guy who's coming over another team from the ACC, Matthew Golden from Houston. He's had a decent freshman year last season over there. This is obviously I think he was the second leader in receivers last year. I'm pretty sure. Obviously, the main guy's gone. His name slips. His name slips my head now. He's gone to the NFL.
Tank Dell, the low guy.
I can't believe I forgot his name. He's gone. So obviously, his second year. Obviously, they've got a new quarterback there as well. Is he going to be? It's tough in it because he's obviously going to be seen as the main guy. He's a really exciting prospect, but coming over to the Big 12 as well, that's a new kettle of fish as well. How do you see Matthew Golden, and do you see a decent player there going forward? Obviously second year.
I'm a little bit hesitant on him. I have him in my 80s in my ranking. So what is that, like 7th round? I think the worry with him, I mentioned the camp reports earlier. We need him to take a step up and become their main guy there at Houston. And they haven't really had any reports coming out that are pro that line of thinking. It's been more, oh, this whole receiver room is talented. Everyone's going to get a lot of touches. The ball's going to get spread around. Whereas I would love to see something that was like Matthew Golden is like our next star. You know what I mean? Because Houston is probably going to struggle right away in the Big 12. It's a step up in competition. They have a new quarterback in Donovan Smith, who is not as good of a passer as Clayton Tune was. And so the raw volume might not be there. That being said, I think there's certainly a lot of upside with Matthew Golden. He was a high 4-star. He's got kind of that prototypical wide receiver size. What is he like 6'1", 180? I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's like the mold that you would think of when you think of a wide receiver. And the freshman production was good, right? It wasn't spectacular in large part because the raw volume in the offense was so high. It's hard to be spectacular, but it was good nonetheless.
I think just going back to a point there that you said, obviously you because obviously for me personally, I'm always still learning about Devy. I'm quite new to it. There's people listening that are quite new to it. You mentioned like taking into account camp reports. I try my best to like look at things. I listen to the Cover 3 podcast. I think it's Bud Elliott that does the summer schools and goes into a little bit of detail with offense and defense. So you catch, because it's normally 247 guys that are on there. And what I like about, we mentioned off talk, we were talking about soccer, but what I really like about college football especially is these guys that are close to it seem very truthful. There's no disguising who's bad and who's good, because they're loyal to the team. Like over for instance, over here in soccer and stuff, if you're loyal to a team, it's really frowned upon to speak bad about a player and things like that, a lot of the time. But over there, you seem to get a lot of honesty. So is that what you feel from when you're looking at camp reports, because it's so honest that you can really take a good vibe if someone's not been talked about a lot and someone's been talked about a lot? Like on the flip side, is that something that you're taking into account because it comes across as like quite honest, or is it just something that maybe different?
It's not an exact science. I mean, college reporting not on the top guys is still pretty few and far between. Not on the top sport or teams is kind of few and far between. That being said, there are always like spring game recaps. There are always like camp reports of like, these are the guys that stood out. This is where the team is struggling a little bit. And so it's kind of just like, if I'm wanting to figure out what's going on with Houston, I literally just Google Houston football 2023 spring. And if there are reports, if there are any tweets about it, then that's what I'm going off of. So who knows? Maybe this is like all like for nothing, and I'm finding some random dude who's just pulling my chain. But no, I mean, you can glean some information from there. I'll also give a shout out. Matt Brunning, he works for C2C, does a good job. He kind of does a lot of the dirty work for us, and us being the community, in terms of he kind of scours over these camp reports and he tries to get takeaways from there. So I can't pretend that I'm digging for all of this. Some of this I have gleaned from him.
It's a good shout. It's another. There's quite a few podcasts in that NC2C and stuff. A couple of Devy ones in there, but yeah, it's a good shout. He definitely goes through the spring games, especially, doesn't he? And he shouted what he sees. What he's heard and what he's seen. And he does like little threads as well on Twitter as well, which is good as well, and it's very helpful. I said I wasn't going to start with the Texas guy, but I'm going to throw him in second. Xavier Worthy, a guy who's probably going to be criticised for his size as it stands now, if he went into the NFL at this size. But ball in hand, he's so exciting. He's so many times when he gets the ball behind the line of scrimmage and he makes plays from where he shouldn't really do, even for someone his size. Very explosive. Had a few drop issues. I mentioned like his size as well, but had a few drop issues, especially in the bowl game against Washington. I think it was like 2 or 3 in a row where he burned the top of the DBs and still managed to drop it after being dropped in the bucket. Is Xavier, because obviously I think a few people kind of like dropped him down as well, their rankings. I don't know if it's because of the size or things like that, but where are you with Xavier Worthy? Has he dropped down your rankings, or is he still like nestled in the top 10?
So he's at number 11 for me. I think that is probably around consensus, if not a little bit higher. I've seen. You're right. People have dropped him for this past year. The size is a knock. For me, it's not that big of a knock. We saw Devontae Smith at a very, very similar size go get drafted early. after being a stud in college and has proven that to be a good pick so far in the NFL. I think size has become less and less of a concern for NFL teams. And if the NFL teams don't really care, then I don't really care. I think this past year, right, he struggled. The whole Texas offense kind of struggled in the passing game. He had a ton of drops. He didn't do his quarterback any favors, and he didn't play as well as he did his freshman year. That being said, he still was very good. Like if you didn't have a preconceived notion of how good he was, you would see what he put out this past year and be like, oh, this guy's pretty good, right? Like I think he led the Big 10 or the Big 12 in receiving yards. And the reason why he's kind of dropped is because his freshman year was that much better. It's like a top 5 freshman year in the past 20 years among wide receivers. So I think that's probably more of who he is rather than last year. Last year he was dealing with injuries. He had drops, which are not very sticky from year to year. I think we see a return to form this year, potentially with Quinn Ewers improving. I think he's going to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft next year.
Yeah, I'm still a fan. I think he's just inside the top 10 for me. I've got him ranked number 9. Like maybe that's me because I've got so much stock in him from last year. Maybe a bit biased from my rankings. But there's obviously there's Jordan Whittington's there was like not Devy, but he's still quite a talented college wide receiver. You've got John Tay Cook coming in freshman. I don't know how much we'll see of him. Adonai Mitchell's transferred over, but do you see any of these guys really pushing his workload down?
No, I don't think these new guys will come at the expense of Xavier Worthy. The second best pass catcher is probably the tight end there, who you have written down on the sheet as well. I actually like A.D. Mitchell. I think he's pretty good. There's been pretty positive camp reports there. I also really liked Isaiah Nayor, the transfer from where'd he come from? Wyoming last year, but he blew out his knee and has kind of been recruited over. So that pipe dream is kind of gone. But no, I don't think any of these guys hurt Xavier Worthy's outlook. I think he's the guy, and everyone else eats what he doesn't.
We might as well. Is there any other wide receivers you want to mention? I feel like there's lots of good wide receivers there. Like obviously, you might have a different outlook to me, like thinking that there is more that are top Devy rankings. But I feel like there's more there that are like probably maybe dart throws. But is there anyone that I've probably missed off that you want to teach me that's saying that you need to look out for this guy this year?
I'll give you one. I love Jaden Bray at Oklahoma State. He got hurt last year, which was a shame, but he had a really good freshman year before he got hurt then as well. But when he has played, he's been very good. Oklahoma State loves their alpha wide receivers, and he fits that mold perfectly. That team's going to stink this year. I don't know who's going to be the quarterback, but if he can stay healthy, I think he can at least return to Devy relevancy. He's not really relevant right now, which is unfortunate because, as you said, with Xavier Worthy, I have a bunch of Jaden Bray shares. But you're right. It's kind of the conference is kind of dry of wide receiver talent outside those top guys.
I follow the Seattle Seahawks, so I kind of follow the Pac-12 a lot because obviously I've got a bit of interest in the Huskies because when I went out there, I went to watch them and kind of got invested in them. There's a guy that's come over, Deshaun Striblin, that's transferred to Oklahoma State that's maybe not a massive Devy thingy, but he's quite a good college quarterback, and who knows this year. I think a couple of guys have transferred out as well, aren't they, as well, from Oklahoma State. John Paul Richardson, I think, is one that's wasn't, again, not a Devy, never gave a guy, but he still took quite a bit of work over there. But yeah, you mentioned the quarterback situation. I don't know who's going to start there at the moment. I don't know who they've got in the number one. I don't know who they've got at the as in the depth chart as number one at the moment. So I couldn't tell you that, to be honest with you. But you mentioned, obviously, we mentioned a guy at tight end at Texas. His name's Jatavian Sanders, a guy that I really like to watch. He was really fun last year. When I played I just play a little bit of DFS for fun. He was always in my my teams in the middle of the season. Yeah, he's. I suppose the question is, where do you rank him as tight end? Because obviously, what you want. Obviously, you want that pass catching ability, which he's got. But he's also a pretty decent blocker as well. Which is always going to transfer well. There's still room to work. It's always hard. I don't think you're always going to be the most perfect blocker going into the NFL from college. There's still room to always work on going into the next level, but he's still got that in college, still a good blocker. Is that something that you want to see from a tight end, unless I suppose you're Brock Bowers, I'm not saying he can't block, but when you're that good at pass catching. But yeah, where do you rank Jadeveon on Sanders? Because for me, I think he's obviously maybe a bit down from Bowers, but I still think he's a really good tight end. As on, I suppose a follow-up question, I'm probably asking you a bit too many questions quickly here, but follow-up questions, how do you draft tight ends in Devy? Because it's a bit of a, unless you've got someone like a Kyle Pitts from years ago, Brock Bowers, that go higher, the rest of them, it's like, is it more dart throws at the end, or yeah?
It's kind of the opposite. Unless I know that they're good, I'm not going to take dart throws on the guys. But I feel like Jatavian Sanders, we know he's good at this point, right? Like, I think he's pretty clearly the Devy tight end too. I have him as my 37th ranked player in Devy. So that's end of the third, early fourth in Devy drafts. I've seen him go a little bit earlier. He was a former 5-star recruit as an athlete, right? He actually got to Texas and was going to play edge, and they moved him to tight end. So he didn't do much as a freshman, but this past year was very impressive from him. He's a fantastic athlete, and something that really stood out to me with Sanders is they scheme him the ball all the time, whether it be like on a bootleg, they'll have him kind of running in and out and get the ball in space. They'll get him. They want to get him the ball in space and give him opportunity to do things with the ball in his hands, which I think is very impressive for a tight end. He's another guy who, if he kind of follows this progression that he has started from this past year, if he produces this year, and as you mentioned, if he kind of continues to improve his blocking, he's another guy who could be a first-round pick in the future. Like, I don't think he's Brock Bowers, but I don't think he's that far off.
No, what really stood out for me, like once he, like you say, he did scheme him, in different ways to get the ball. It wasn't just like downfield, but he didn't have the best acceleration. But once he got his motor going, he's surprisingly faster than I probably expected him to be for the size he is. There's a number of times when he took off the line, it maybe took him 2 or 3 steps to go, but then all of a sudden he got this burst from nowhere, and he's just kind of like a train, like probably not being able to stop. But yeah, he's someone that I really like. I only put the one tight end down because I couldn't see anyone in there. Like I think you mentioned that you're looking at the opposite anyway, so unless they really stand out. But is there anyone in the tight end range in there? I know Jim Nagy put out the tight ends for the Senior Bowl, and I think there was just the guy from TCU. Is it Wiley? I think, but I haven't seen enough for him to comment on him as a Devy prospect.
Only thing, I think I've seen him catch one ball ever. He's just massive. No, I'm trying to think of any tight ends in the Big 12 outside of Jatavian Sanders. No, I mean, no one who's really Devy relevant, right?
No. But yeah, I think Jadavion Sanders is enough anyway. That he's that good. We don't need to talk about anyone else. Nelly, I really appreciate you coming on and talking some Big 12 prospect with us. I'm going to put you on the spot here, and just before we go, for new players, at the Devy, getting into it, what's the best advice you could give someone who's taking the step into Devy this year in off season, going into drafts, or whether that's how you choose players, constructing your team compared to maybe you've got your NFL side, how you would go about it? What's the best advice you'd probably give to new guys playing?
Don't be overconfident in your Devy evaluations. Don't draft Nick Singleton already expecting him to be Bijan Robinson, right? Like, we kind of tend to look at these Devy prospects as we look at them with rose-colored glasses in terms of we want to see the best outcome, and that kind of grows into our expectation. So try and use evaluate with a level head and with objectivity, and factor that in with your values to the NFL players, right? Because at the end of the day, you're paying a buy-in year in and year out for Devy, and the goal is not to just give away your money. The goal is to build up a good team, and that's Devy players are a means to an end there, but just view them realistically rather than with blind optimism. Understand that there's downside risks with these players as well.
I appreciate that, Nelly. That's great advice for anyone taking over and just, a Devy rosters this year. Again, thank you for coming on. make sure you follow Nelly on Twitter. I'll make sure I get it right this time, at a Nelly Ticks. Is that correct?
Yeah,
obviously
yeah,
you're
that's perfect.
a massive analytics guy, aren't you, and stuff. I see a lot of your posts on Twitter. They're really useful. So definitely give him a follow on there. And obviously make sure you follow the Devy Marketplace podcast as well. It's one fantastic podcast, for Devy. They like I say, it's always a good relationships between the three as well. Really bounce off each other, and you do get a lot of stick for your food drafts, Nelly. And I think it's a bit unwarranted, to be honest with you. I think some of your drafts have been excellent, and I think that they need to lay off you a little bit over there.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I think my food takes are great.
Yeah, I will drop all the places that they can catch you in the bottom of the video, and make sure you all follow them there. Yeah, Nelly, I appreciate you coming on and spending your time here with us. I know you're a busy guy, so yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, happy to come on. This was great. This was fun.
Thank you very much. I'll speak again soon.